Good morning, 11 Warriors. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast. I'm joined this morning by beat reporter Andy Anders. Andy, how are you doing today?
Doing swell, George. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. I was originally planning to talk to you about the release of the AP poll relative to the conversation we had about the college or the coaches poll rather last week, but you happen to write a very popular piece about a subject that has struck a chord, should we say, with the Ohio State Buckeye fan base. And that would be the one of the major game day experience changes that I talked about with Chase last week, and that is the song Ohio by Caamp. Now, I know you are the resident hip hop aficionado among the 11 Warrior staff. So I know that you are more musically inclined than the average member of the Ohio State beat, 11 Warriors or otherwise. However, you did kind of steer your way, dip your toe into folksy music here. And I thought it was funny the way that you led the story with Dan kind of putting you on the spot in front of Ross Bjork. So before we dive into your analysis of the song, could you kind of recall that story for us a little bit?
Yeah, it was just funny standing there in the press conference, and it's still like at the beginning of this press conference, Ross was just going like he was scrolling through a tablet in front of them, just reading off what all the tradition evolved changes were, and kind of going through them one by one, and he gets through to again the Camp Ohio, the song they're introducing as a new game day tradition for Ohio State, and he's looking around and he goes, who's the band Camp? Are there any music buffs here in the media? And he's just looking around the crowd. And Dan, sure enough, points at me. A few other people see Dan point at me. They point at me, and then Ross looks over at me and goes, "Yes, the band Camp. You
You
know the
there,
band
young
Camp.
man.
The song. They have a song called Ohio." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm nodding yes." No, I had only heard of them that morning. I am not,
Yeah.
as you stated, not my usual genre of music, bluegrass. I definitely heard some of it growing up in Chillicothe, Ohio, but um, not my usual lane. So, having heard the song only that morning, though, I wasn't going to stand there in this press conference and be like, "No, Ross, I don't know. I don't have any idea." After being called the music buff of the beat, which I think just stems from the fact that like I'm very willing to sing in public, which has definitely embarrassed some of my friends sometimes. And also, I've made a song or two here and there as like a hobby thing that maybe some people on the beat, maybe Dan has heard. But yeah, it was definitely a very funny interaction and something that brightened my day looking back, honestly.
In terms of the song itself, I said last week that I'm going to put off list, especially given what the reaction of the community has been, which is less than pleased, putting it nicely, just relative to, I guess, thinking about this song in the context of it being a Seven Nation Army type game day hype up experience. I've put off listening to it because I want the first time it crosses into my eardrums to be when the game is actually going on and I can gauge the Ohio State fan base, their reaction to it live in Ohio Stadium. However, you've obviously become very familiar with it given the article that you just wrote. So if I'm wondering if you can put your music reviewer hat back on for us briefly and just kind of, describe your experience with the song and how you think it may or may not fit in with what Ohio State has planned for it this season.
In a vacuum, I like the song. There's nothing wrong with the song. It's fine. Again, not my usual genre. It's not something I'd just like throw on in the background while I'm doing dishes or anything. Again, I'm more in that rap, hip hop, maybe some classic rock mixed in there kind of guy. But um, analyzing it, I think you can analyze it pretty objectively when talking about a stadium anthem, something that folks are going to identify with. And I think it misses the mark for a lot of the qualities you look for if you're looking for that thing that's really gonna hype the crowd up, that's really gonna get people going, get the energy going, keep it like alive while Fox is taking one of its 10-minute commercial breaks, you know. Um, it's not that. It's got kind of an odd cadence to it. It's very like mellow, folksy bluegrass, right? Simple instrumentation. The main thing for me with a stadium anthem, because you can have like slow stadium anthems, you can like Country Roads at West Virginia or Dixieland Delight at Alabama, or Oregon has a song that's very slow. They play Rocky Top for Tennessee. Like there are songs that are slower that can still get a stadium going, but those are songs that if they aren't don't have a very deep rooted connection with the state or region that they're from, are very popular otherwise. This is not that. I would wager generously maybe like 10% of the fan base had heard of this song before Ohio State comes out and says, "Hey, it's going to be part of our game day tradition." Maybe that's an underestimate. Like I said, I hadn't heard of it. A lot of the reactions from people seem to be that they hadn't heard of it before. And Caamp isn't not they're not obscure, but if you don't listen to bluegrass and that kind of music, I don't think you would necessarily know who they are. So you don't have this inherent energy built into it, and it lacks like the chorus isn't very catchy. Like it's not an earworm that a whole stadium is going to belt at the top of their lungs. You know, the suggestion I made in my story was "Ride" by 21 Pilots would have been a good like stadium anthem. 21 Pilots also from Columbus, like Caamp is. Um, of something the crowd knows and a very catchy, like again, chorus that you can sing along with. I think I think where it may work, where it could possibly work, is something that Ross hinted at in the press conference and something that was sort of hinted at in the tradition of All Page, which is more of like a touching video tribute to the state of Ohio, to Ohioans, not necessarily something where the entire stadium is just like energy, getting the veins pumping for a big upcoming third down or something during a timeout. It's more like going to be in the first half. Um, Emotional, kind of slower, like moment of connection for the audience. I think it has a chance to catch on in that way. I have my doubts again because a lot of people don't really know the song per se. Are they going to identify with the lyrics, which are, you know, there's some stuff that's kind of Ohio in it, but it's not really about Ohio. It's more about childhood memories made in Ohio. Again, not a huge criticism of the song. I like the song. It's just for the purpose it's serving in the stadium, I don't know. And so it's definitely not going to work if the goal is to hype up the crowd. If the goal is to have some moment of connection over shared Ohio roots, maybe. And that's kind of where I'm at with it.
So I guess other than what Bjork has kind of put out there publicly about the decision behind picking this song, you mentioned 21 Pilots already as a very, very high visibility popular band that has ties to Columbus. I think they might have restarted touring recently. I'm not sure, but I know Rascal Flats is another one that has Columbus ties. And you know, if you're a hip hop guy, then I'm sure that you're well aware of RJD2 having the Columbus ties as well. There's no shortage of musically talented Columbusians, if you want to call them that, that could have filled this role that Caamp is now occupying. So I guess what if you had to speculate, why do you think that this song by this band specifically was chosen for this role, given there were no shortage of candidates that could have fulfilled this purpose?
It's a good question. And honestly, like it is hard to like speculate as a as a journalist when you don't have that sort of inside info as to exactly what the selection process was for a song like this. I think like I said, if you're looking for some emotional tribute video to Ohio to set a video to, maybe that influenced the choice in some way. Maybe they were just for me, actually, here's what I think. Dan Hope actually brought this up in talking with him a little bit, is that maybe they're leaning a little too hard into the Ohio of it all, where they weren't as willing to consider songs for this type of role that weren't directly referencing the state. You know, 21 Pilots doesn't really have songs like that that are like about Ohio, talking about Ohio. Again, to me, this song isn't like about Ohio other than being called Ohio and singing the word Ohio in the chorus. It's he's talking about like kissing his crush under the bleachers in 7th grade and smoking cigarettes behind his school. It's not like uniquely Ohio anywhere in there. He doesn't reference Lake Erie or any of the cities in Ohio or any iconic landmarks or talk about the Buckeyes. It's just like childhood memories formed in Ohio. But because it's called Ohio, because Caamp isn't necessary. I mean, again, they're not obscure. They're known by some people. Um, and I think they wanted that sort of emotional, like rallying thing for Ohioans. They kind of maybe, again, just based on the public response to it thus far, leaned a little too hard into the whole it's got to be about Ohio thing. And they wanted something emotional because the Black Keys have a song called Ohio too that they play at the end of games a lot of times, and the Black Keys are from Ohio. I think that's another band you could have pulled a really good song from if you wanted to have that Ohio connection. But if you're talking about like an emotional song, that's not really the Ohio Black Keys song. That is a little more upbeat. So um, yeah, I think maybe they tried to box themselves into a little too tight of a window with what they were looking for with this. And rather than picking something that was guaranteed to get the crowd fired up or that people were going to hear and recognize and be willing to sing along with, um, maybe leaned a little too hard on it's got to be about Ohio. It's got to be this Ohio thing.
Yeah, and I have to say, for the purpose of what you're describing that this song is trying to achieve, other than the getting the crowd excited thing, it kind of feels like Ohio State already has that role filled with "Hang On, Sloopy,"
Yeah.
even though that's not even a song that is explicitly tied to the state of Ohio and doesn't really have more than like what, two lyrics tied to it. Everybody in the stadium is still singing it between the third and fourth quarters and has done it for years. So it's, as the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But we'll see how the fan base reacts to it in the initial stages of the season and as the season draws on, because I would imagine it's probably not going away, even if there's mixed reviews after the first game. It's probably going to be a growing process, and we'll see if it does, in fact, grow on some people. But Andy, you can now add music critic to your belt of journalism expertise, and we are very grateful for your insight on Ohio by Caamp. So we appreciate your time, and the 11 Dubcast will be back tomorrow morning with Chase Brown. Thanks for tuning in. Take care, folks.